And joining us today on our Book Talk 7, great to welcome back a woman who has had very successful novels. Her previous one, The Girl Who Came Home, did very well, New York Times bestseller. She has a brand new one now. We're going to talk to her about it. It's called A Memory of Violets, a novel of London's flower sellers. We're joined today all the way over from Ireland. Hazel Gaynor joining us by telephone. And Hazel, good to chat with you again. I guess it was about a year or so ago when the previous book came out. But first of all, congratulations on that one. They did very well.
Thank you, Doug. Thanks so much for having me on the show again. Yeah, it's been quite a whirlwind since I spoke to you a year ago, but it's brilliant. It's so nice now to be able to share a second book. So yeah, lovely to have the two books now.
What was that like, the previous one? Obviously, anytime you write a book, you hope it's successful, but when it's this successful, I guess that even exceeds your own expectations at times, right?
Absolutely, and you know, this is such a strange profession sometimes. You spend so much time on your own, writing away, and for so long the book is like a secret. You know, there's only yourself, your editor, your agent, close friends and family. And, you know, when I was writing my debut, The Girl Who Came Home, which was set around the Titanic, it was such a huge subject, really, to cover for my first book. So, you know, I always write about subjects I'm very passionate about, that I feel very drawn to, and you just hope that that connects with the readers. And I'm just, you know, what else could you hope for, that it's as successful as The Girl Who Came Home? So I'm just incredibly grateful for everybody who read the book, who told their friends, who borrowed it from the library. You know, it's fantastic.
And that book, like this current one, I guess the term is historical novel, right? There's a lot of fact-based history behind it, even though you're creating a story, but there's history you have to kind of research, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, that's been a real theme with these first two novels. I've very much gone back to, I mean, I'm very drawn to history, and I think history is always something that will be very prevalent in my writing, and particularly with A Memory of Violets as well as The Girl Who Came Home, I've enjoyed so much the process of discovering these sort of lost stories and lost voices from the past. With Titanic, obviously, such a well-known subject. With A Memory of Violets, I'm delving into Victorian London and into the world of street sellers and flower sellers in particular. I think the best example I can use to give people a picture of this is Eliza Doolittle in My Fair Lady. Right. You know, these women, and actually what I found in my research was just how many very, very young children were working on the streets of London at that time and selling flowers to make a living, and living in the most appalling conditions, very poor, you know, cold and hungry and barefoot all year round. And I just felt so compelled to tell their stories, and discovering the story of the history of the flower sellers. And again, you know, I love to put my own words and my own characters around that, but very much based in actual facts, that, like, discovering buried treasure. You know, I just love that process of finding these stories and bringing them back to life again.
How do you go about getting stories about these specific girls that did this? Did people at that time, newspaper articles, maybe write about that, or how do you find out the details?
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating. I mean, I really very much did start from the point of view of Eliza Doolittle. I played the role of Eliza in my school musical when I was 17, yes. So I felt very much connected to her. I just loved that era. I loved the character, and I wanted to find out, how would somebody become a flower seller, and what would the situation they would be living in? So I followed that trail and discovered an amazing book by a man called Henry Mayhew, who actually went around the streets of London and, you know, very kind of leading thinking for his time. He interviewed these street sellers and created this incredible account of a really raw personal experience of living and working on the streets. And from there I discovered the stories of these little watercress sellers and flower sellers, many of whom were orphans, and actually many of whom were Irish, which I found very interesting. And from there I found another story of a man called John Groom, who wanted to help the flower sellers, and he actually set up a charity to take them off the streets into homes, and he taught them how to make artificial flowers from silk and paper. And his work really was a huge legacy for people. A lot of the young women and children at the time were disabled or physically affected in some way. And, you know, he was a very benevolent, very entrepreneurial man, and his charity actually still exists today under a different name. And his girls were known as the Flower Girls. So once I found their story, I wanted to combine that with the story of these little children that I'd read about in the other piece of work, and that's where the story of A Memory of Violets really started from.
Yeah, it's interesting, kind of almost a real-life Henry Higgins in a sense, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is what I find so fascinating. I suppose now we're very lucky we have so many routes to discover the past. With the internet, with huge archives, with libraries, with museums, and I draw on all of those. And, there are very rich newspaper reports of life at the time and events at the time, and I think we sometimes forget that, that people did still write about their life, and, there were these incredible characters, and, like you say, a real Henry Higgins, and these people who really have been lost to the past, and it's just a real joy to find them again. And most of the readers who've read A Memory of Violet so far have said one of the things they've enjoyed about the book is just learning about something they hadn't realised, and understanding more about these lives on the streets. And I've reduced quite a few people to tears, so I will warn you, it's quite an emotional read as well.
And they're not breaking out in song.
They're not breaking out in song. And actually, I was very conscious of doing that because, the story of Eliza Doolittle, it's very romanticised, it's very Cinderella story, and I very much wanted to not go there and look at, really what was happening, and it was so far removed. I mean, it's quite difficult, really, sometimes to imagine. But the story doesn't all dwell on that. I also have this other character called Tilly Harper, who's a young lady who moves from the north of England to go and work in one of these flower homes, and she finds the diary of one of these little orphaned girls who had lost her sister. She had become separated from her sister 40 years previously, and it's through Tilly reading the little girl called Florrie, reading her diary entries, that we start to learn about the lives of the flower sellers, and it all sort of forms part of the mystery, and very much based around the relationship of sisters and family as well.
Now, this obviously took place late 1800s, early 1900s. Is there any equivalent today of girls doing this in England or the UK?
No, I mean, I suppose that, that life on the streets, it was very much, it wasn't really a choice. It was just all that was left for these people. They weren't physically able to work in a factory.
Right.
They weren't educated enough to work in domestic service as a maid. So life on the streets was really a last resort. And fortunately, in London now and in most cities in England, it would be something that you would only see through the market traders, and it's very much a choice that they want to, they enjoy working on their market stall and selling it and you still meet some great characters. And there is still a flower market in London, but it's very much a huge warehouse, where the florists go to get their supplies for the shops. So you wouldn't see people walking around. I mean, people sold all sorts back then. They sold cat's meat, they had knives to grind, they sold vegetables, fruit, they sold muffins, all you can imagine, these really rich characters out there. So no, it's very different now, thankfully, I think we should say,
sure.
yeah.
And you also have, just kind of reading through some of the notes, the different flowers mean different things. That was kind of interesting. Like pink carnation means I'll never forget you. You have a whole list of those. Was that part of what they sold back then? They had the meanings for the flowers back then?
Absolutely, and it's amazing, and this beautiful lost tradition of what was called the language of flowers, and that at the time in Victorian England, ladies and gentlemen obviously couldn't just go up to somebody and ask them for a drink or a coffee. They had to express their emotions very carefully, and often they did this through selected flowers, which all had a different meaning. And I've brought this into the novel because flowers obviously meant a lot to the flower sellers, and they would be very aware of this language, and would, talk about violets for faithfulness and roses for love and lavender for forgiveness and, all these gorgeous things. And there's 4 particular flowers that are prevalent in A Memory of Violets. And each has a lovely illustration. Actually, the publishers have done a wonderful job of making the book look beautiful. And there's purple hyacinth, which is Please Forgive Me, pink carnation, as you say, I'll never forget you, primrose, I can't live without you, and pansy, you're in my thoughts. And these are flowers that meant something to Florrie and her little sister Rosie, and Florrie has pressed these flowers between the pages of her diary to express her sadness and regret at losing her little sister. And I just thought this was amazing. I'd heard about it before, actually, but only when I'd started researching for this novel did I kind of understand it fully myself.
Yeah.
And just how much, literally, a lady would have a dictionary that would help her interpret the meaning of a bouquet or a posy. You can imagine the disaster if you got the flowers wrong, you know.
That's right.
So, again, a lovely little piece of history, and you know, hopefully adds to the colour, and there's a lot of kind of sense of flowers and violets. There's, you know, flowers are a theme. A lot of the characters have floral names, and, you know, I hope that really comes through in the writing of the novel as well.
The name of the book is A Memory of Violets, a novel of London's flower sellers. We've been talking with Hazel Gaynor today. And Hazel, I know you're very active on the social media. I see you there all the time, but give out a website. People get a hold of you or get the book.
Yeah, absolutely, and I love to hear from readers, you know, so I do always say don't be afraid to get in touch. It's lovely to hear from people who've read the book. So my website is hazelgaynor.com, and I also am on Twitter at Hazel Gaynor, and on Facebook at Hazel Gaynor Books. So people can find me on those places, and as you say, I do love to chat and share. There's lots of history, there's lots of background to how I researched the books and the kind of real story behind The Memory of Violets as well. So lots more for people to read on once they finish the book.
Great, and we'll also have a place on our website. People can order it as well. And Hazel, always great to chat with you. Hopefully we'll do it again when your next book comes out. I'm sure you're working on it now. You don't have to give away the details yet, but we'd love to have you back on the next time. But thanks for joining us today.
That's fantastic. I'll certainly look forward to that, and thank you so much for having me on the show.
If you'd like to order the book we're talking about, please go to DougMilesMedia.com and enter the author's name in the Amazon search box. Thank you for listening. Please come back soon for more conversations here at DougMilesMedia.com. This has been a presentation of Doug Miles Media, all rights reserved. You can listen to or download previous programs at iTunes, Stitcher.com, or Doug Miles Media.